Everybody, welcome back to another episode of One Soccer Today, the CPL season recap show and a look ahead to the playoffs. It is a wonderful time of year because Oliver Platt and Gareth Wheeler, all of our questions have been answered. The season came to an exciting conclusion. Gareth did double duty with Christian Jack and Jordan Wilson, staying up late, back in the studio nice and early, getting through all of it for us. You were a great shepherd. We appreciate you, Gareth Wheeler. But in case you missed that wonderful presentation, let us recap for you how the table looks now that all 28 matches have been played. Cavalry, they are the champions. We knew that. What we didn't know is how many points they were going to finish with. That answer is 55 from 16 wins and a plus 19 goal differential. Forge and Halifax were literally even on everything. It was like the fifth tiebreaker that gave Forge the ever important second spot, not only to play Cavalry in the 1v2 game, but also if Cavalry win the double, Forge will be headed back to CONCACAF play. We can discuss the merits of not having a head-to-head tiebreaker and how silly that is to me later if we would like, but we move on to Pacific, who continued to stumble late in the season. They finished with almost the same number of defeats as wins. 40 points in fourth. York United, they squeaked through Atletico Ottawa by 2 points. Vancouver seventh, and Valor on the wooden spoon. But Oliver Platt, if I may start with you, I think we should begin this program with the scenes at Spruce Meadows. Tommy Wheeldon Jr. with some hip thrusts and shield raises and the celebration, the party. Just your initial reaction, because I think Gareth and I gave our opinion on the show. So we'll give you the first word on what you thought of that. And then I got a pretty big question for you. But let's start with the scenes.
Yeah, it was great to see. And these are the kind of storylines that I think the Canadian Premier League is creating and that history creates, right? You know, years going by create of seeing this Cavalry team, which has been one of the dominant teams in the league through the first few seasons of the league, but still waiting to get their hands on a trophy. You can see what that moment means to them, and the scenes and celebrations. They're a consequence not just of the achievement this season, but what they maybe haven't achieved in the past that has kind of led to this moment and led to the elation that you can see there from Tommy Wooden Jr. and the players. So I just love watching games at Spruce Meadows. I think it's, with all due respect to Halifax, which is obviously fantastic as well, I think it's the best venue we have in the league. Like, it looks so good. Just the grass pitch is beautiful. It's like an old English stadium. So I'm very fond of it. And seeing them celebrate a trophy was excellent. So yeah, really enjoyed this weekend's games.
Gareth Wheeler?
I was just laughing at Ollie because it's like his old English heart
reminds me of
feel like he's back at home. Spectacular day. I love how all the fans really got involved. I thought it was done the right way. The timing worked out perfectly. You like celebrating that after your 28-game marathon has come to an end. When you celebrate, sometimes they do it before the game or it happens a couple games before you wrap things up. This was a chance for the team just to kind of embrace the moment, their fans and everyone involved as well. I just thought it was spectacular and well deserved. This team didn't back their way into winning the title. They did it quite convincingly. They've been the best team by far over the last 2+ months. They've rebuilt on the fly, yet there's familiar faces from day one in Wheeldon, Carducci, and Camargo as well. There's just a lot to like about the way the entire thing played out. A beautiful October day on a long weekend in Calgary. So, this is what it's all about. I hope that those pictures continue to be shared across this country because that is what it's all about right there.
And I think there was something with the fact it was the first time the CPL Shield was presented, and it looked absolutely gorgeous, by the way. I would love if moving forward, they would sort of have the Shield as the players walk out of the tunnel before the game, or at least at midfield, just to kind of like Pacific can look over their shoulder, know that they've lost it, and Cavalry can be all smug that it's beside them. I think that'd be a cool little piece for the celebration moving on, but that'd be
the Guard of Honor.
Guard of Honor, I was just going to say, there was no Guard of Honor from Pacific.
Nope, none whatsoever.
I don't think James Merriman was in the mood for that, but we can talk about that a little bit later. On the dominance, though, Wheels, was this the best regular season performance by any club in the 5 years? Do you think 2019 Cavalry still might have that edge, or do you think it might be this one?
This was the most dominant 2.5 months we've seen in the Canadian Premier League. There's no doubt about that. But what's the question? The most impressive, Adam Jenkins? I won't give Cavalry that honor, although I'm not taking anything away from what they've accomplished, because the most impressive regular season title or regular season performance for me was Forge in 2021. Coming out of COVID, the season started in June. They played weekend, midweek for the duration all the way through November, playing continental competition as well. They played over 40 games, I think, in like a 3 or 4 month span. You might know the numbers better than me. I know they finished level on points with Cavalry that season, but the fact that they survived and technically finished on top, it was just a miraculous feat at that time. And I don't think it's a situation that any side in the Canadian Premier League will have to go through that kind of a gauntlet ever again to get to that point. So 2021, we all lived in a crazy world at that time. But what was asked of Forge coming out of that was exceptional, and they rose to the challenge, and they just were so unbelievable that year through everything that they had to go through.
It's a very good point too, because when they're going to CONCACAF League, they're not playing like a Forge B team. Like it's the same guys, and they're getting on a plane from San Salvador to go to Victoria and back. That's a very good shout, Ollie. Where do you lean on this argument?
So the same team the same contender came to mind for me as well, which was Forge in 2021. Ironically, the year they didn't win the league.
Right.
That season, but that team was exceptional. It depends on how you define it. Like if you're just looking at a regular season and not the cup competitions and taking that context out of it, then I think this by Cavalry was the most dominant regular season. They're 13 points clear at the top of the table. It's the biggest margin ever. They had more points in 2019, but I think the league is so much stronger now that isn't really comparable in terms of the level of competition they've had to face through the season. But if you were to say who is the best team, in CPL history in a single season, you would have to put them up against, I think, that 2021 Forge team. And, Wheels went through the accomplishments there, the CONCACAF semi-finals, nearly in the Canadian Championship final, only a penalty shootout denied them that against Montreal, still finished atop the regular season, went to the final and lost on a few days rest after that CONCACAF semi. And you just look at the players they had as well, like on top of Becker and Jonsson and the guys who are still there now, like Awua, Crutzen, Babuli, Cisse, like it was a stacked team. So I would love to see those two, Forge 2021 and Cavalry 2023, face off against each other. I think I give that Forge team the edge. But if you want to take it just in terms of the CPL regular season, this Cavalry one has set a new bar, I think.
Incredibly well outlined. Unfortunately, this talk needs to go too close to the other side of the table now, and that's Atletico Ottawa, because they were the side who, in a gesture, hypothetically handed the CPL Shield to Cavalry, even though they didn't get it last year, but that's neither here nor there. But what happened, Ollie? Because this was a regular season juggernaut that I remember when we were getting ready for these matches and I'd be texting or calling with coaches beforehand, there was almost dread in their voice that they were going to go play Atletico Ottawa because it was going to be 90 minutes of suffering. It was going to be really hard to play the type of game that they want to play. And then this season, there's a couple of ways of looking at it, obviously. If they just shored up the last 10 minutes of the matches, they'd be in a playoff position. They might still have that not looking forward to playing them type of air around them, but that's not what happened. They miss out on the playoffs the year after a fifth team was added. It's got to be incredibly disappointed. So in your eyes, what happened and what do you think they do this offseason to try and rectify and get back next year?
Well, there's a lot of things I think you could pinpoint and talk about. You can certainly talk about the attack of the team and the way they struggled down the stretch there. KJ outlined it well on the weekends. Like in this bad run they've had to finish the season, they've really struggled to score goals beyond set pieces and goalkeeping howlers. So that's been a big issue. Balu Tabla's obviously been a big miss. But if you look at the season as a whole and you compare it to last season when they won the regular season, the big difference is defensively. Like the attack in terms of its output has actually gone up a little bit from last season, but the problem is the defense has got a lot worse. And I don't think the 5 more goals they conceded this year compared to last year tells the full story there. I think it's worse than that because they had some issues last season. They conceded quite a few penalties. They've never been a great team on set pieces, weirdly, either Atletico Ottawa. But if you just look at the open play goals, they only conceded 14 last season, which is a phenomenal number. That nearly doubled this season. It was 26. So that for me is when you're looking at, forget about wanting to see the team progress and attack and play more football. Just compare last season when they're a very good team to this year. The defense has been the big difference. And there are some reasons for that. Notably, I think in terms of personnel, like Maxime Tissot, over 2,000 minutes last year, around 1,000 this year. Nathan Ingham had some time out. Diego Espejo played about 500, 600 minutes fewer than he did last year. Sissoko, 2,000-minute player again, not here this year. Drew Becky, 1,500 minutes, retires. So there was some big drop-offs in terms of the output they were getting from, I think, players who left and maybe weren't adequately replaced, and players who were still there who didn't play as much because of injury or suspension issues. And then just in terms of the balance of the team as well, the left side I thought was a huge issue all year long. Like I just mentioned, Tissot spent some time out. Sacco did not play much at all, so they were down a natural left back. There was less experience, I think, in the team this year compared to last year in those key defensive positions. So, like I said, there's a lot of different things you can point to, and I think a lot of people will look at the attack because Tabla was such a clear difference from last year compared to this one in terms of that threat. But for me, the defense took quite a big step backwards, and the team just lost their identity in that way, being able to grind out results, being able to see out results late in games in a way that really cost them over the course of the season.
Wills?
I'm not going to be overly critical of Atletico Ottawa because I think some of the criticism's been a little bit over the top, to be honest with you, because in their last 7 games, they lost 5 of them by conceding after the 88th minute. I mean, it's just finishing out games. I don't think it's any coincidence that some of those losses came when Diego Spejo, one of the best defenders in my eyes, was out through injury. Malcolm Shaw, a player that became incredibly important to this team, out through injury. It just all happened. It all came tumbling down at the wrong time. You draw 2 of those games and pick up points, then you're through. You're through to the playoffs. So that's the real difference here. I think that Ollie and KJ kind of highlighted their attack. They made a little bit of a gamble for me, spending money to bring Sam Salter to the club. It doesn't mean that he's not going to become a really good player for the club, but this season was inconsistent at best. They need a true out-and-out number 9. A lot of teams in this league need that true out-and-out number 9, a reliable source of goals from someone other than their central midfielder, Ollie Bassett. I really don't think that they were that far off. I don't think that they're that far off. If you're going to learn a lesson in Ottawa this offseason, is that it can be done, transforming your style of play and personnel through an offseason and having success. Cavalry is the blueprint to that. There was incredible and has been incredible turnaround over recent years. Their style of play in Cavalry became a little bit stale, but the perseverance, thinking outside the box, the way that the team built, the way that the team scouted in Cavalry has set the bar. This is what you do in order to evolve and make sure that you're on top and you end up on top of the Canadian Premier League. So I think there's some work to do there. They tried to change. They just simply couldn't. There's a lot of experienced players. I think they need to go a little bit younger next season. Like I said, bring in some attacking talent. Other than that, they are right there. I don't think that there's that much that separates them between playoff teams in this league. It's unfortunate that all the progress that is being made both on and off the field, the season ends in a negative way. It's just they just got cold at the wrong time of the season, Adam, for me, and somehow find themselves on the outside looking in.
It's going to be a fascinating offseason just to see, Ollie, if they decide that there is something that drastically needs to change or if they just need to be better from within. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to add, like, the other part of this is, like, are they going to lose players?
Retire, transfer, etc.
Yeah, like Zapater came here, I think, on pretty short notice. He just kind of decided to take the plunge and take a chance, move to a different country. Obviously, we know what stage of his career he's at this point. Espejo was on training with Inter Miami last preseason. Does he want to take the next step? Iliadis was on loan. Assi was on loan. Bassett has done the hard part now, which is not just have one great season in the CPL, but have 2. And I think that could lead to some interest in him as well. So I'd be interested to see if the guys that really did impress for them are all kind of coming back to Atletico Ottawa.
But the thing with Ottawa is, yeah, sure, like all Canadian Premier League players face that. Cavalry have gone on and lost some very good players over the course of time. Yeah. It's just a matter of how you replace them. Now, all of a sudden, because of the fan support, the way that the club's operated off the field, I think it's enticing for players to go on and join Atletico Ottawa. There's a level of stability there. There's fandom. I think there's a lot to like about being part of that club. And what we saw, I mean, it's not just Cavalry. Vancouver FC was able to recruit during the season to improve their outlook to add to what they had. So I think you just need to be a little bit more quick. I think that maybe Atletico Ottawa was a little bit slow in terms of some of their recruitment and the adjustments that they did make. You need to be lean in this league. Things change so quickly. But Ottawa is a destination. It absolutely is one in the Canadian Premier League. So I'm kind of excited to see what changes they do make and whether players within the league right now might have their eyes on Ottawa, our nation's capital, being their new home. It wouldn't surprise me whatsoever.
I'm also a little bit biased in how I view the city. It's a phenomenal place to live. The facilities are great. Being right downtown with their training, with their matches, I think is a big, big perk. So you're right, Gareth. It'll be curious to see how they're able to leverage all of the things that they have at their disposal into their off-season movement. And it's a long off-season, which might be the worst part for them, as they know they're not going to be kicking a ball again in earnest until April. So we'll be curious to see how they sort of manage this off-season. But the playoffs do start on Wednesday, 10 p.m. Eastern time. For those York United supporters watching, of course, 7 p.m. local on Vancouver Island. And here is how the bracket looks. Halifax awaits the winner of that 4-5 match. It is either Pacific or York who will head to the East Coast, and that is the travel on short notice. That is one of the reasons why it was not enviable to finish in that fourth spot for Pacific, but they understand what's at stake. They have the one home match, and they got to do the rest of it on the road to win the CPL final, just as they had done in 2021. Cavalry and Forge, meanwhile, will square off at Spruce Meadows on Saturday. The winner heads straight to the final. Whoever loses that game will have a second kick at the can of whoever comes to Halifax, Pacific, and York. So let's talk about Pacific, because they were not expecting to be in that position, Gareth Wheeler. And I think it's a big surprise for them, a massive disappointment for them, that they do have this really unenviable path to try and get back and win their second CPL playoff title. Where do you want to begin with them? How about the new look they tried on Saturday before losing by 3-0? Or do you think that they're incredibly in danger, at risk here?
Of course they are. Just look at the last few months. They were running away with it. I don't think they lost a game in their first 9 in the Canadian Premier League.
Unbelievable.
They had 21 points over the course of that span, and they had 21 goals over the course of that span. That's how many goals they scored the rest of the Canadian Premier League season. You know, there's been turmoil, there's been open dissent on the field, there's been consistent rotation amongst the players in this team, notwithstanding the center back pairing, which has been stable. They've chosen their goalkeeper, but a lot of their problems just all revolve around continuity. What is this team's identity? And the fact that, you know, James Merriman is still searching for something in game number 28 of the season when you're going up against the champions elect, that's worrying for me. Especially going into a game against York. Say what you will about them, you know what their identity is. They've played the exact same way over the last 2 months. It's just chopping and changing. I don't think any of us know. Why they sitting around, you know, having this discussion between the three of us, we might have 3 different opinions about the best players or how they should line up going into this playoff game. And I guarantee the same conversations are happening with Pacific as well. It's just, they're very, very good players, but they simply haven't come together as a team. In fact, they've gone the other way. They're actually less connected as a team in their identity. I thought they turned the corner the last time that they played York United, smashed them 4-1. It could have been 8-1 on that day. But since that time, they've gone absolutely in the other direction. And that is exceptionally worrying heading into a one-and-you're-done playoff situation.
Oliver Platt, if I may, can I float this stat to you? Mm-hmm. Pacific at home this season, 5 wins, 4 draws, 5 defeats, 16 goals for, 15 goals conceded. York away from home are the best team in the Canadian Premier League, 24 points from 7 wins and only 4 defeats. There's going to be a chat about this in our Tony Bet top picks a little bit later, but does that make you worried a little bit more about the Tridents?
Yeah, it's a nightmare situation for them. Firstly, I think they'd rather play York in York.
Yeah, I agree.
Than they would at home. Firstly, because of the matchup, but also
and the travel.
The travel is a nightmare, right? Like, even if they get through this game, they have to go on an insanely long away trip, one of the longest in world football, to go and play Halifax on 3 days rest. Like, it's a really difficult situation for them, and it's compounded by the fact that it feels like they've underachieved, right? Like, I think there's some teams like York United, a prime example, who are going in where even if you're in the bottom playoff seeding, you feel like you're going in with momentum. You're kind of happy to have qualified. It looked like it was in doubt there at the end of the season for a little while. And you have a good feeling. Pacific, it's the opposite. This team should be higher in the standings based on talent for me. They've kind of gone off the rails in the second half of the season after a great start. And I'm with Wheels. Like, I don't think they quite know right now what the winning formula is, what the right combination of play. Like, I think we should go around the table here and pick our front three for Pacific on Wednesday, because I have a feeling that we'll have three completely different combinations.
Beyond that, the attacking three, of course, it's a conversation because they're not scoring anywhere near enough goals. They haven't had a clean sheet in 11 games, guys.
Yeah.
They have Didic and Mayer Jaguar as their two center backs entering this team. It's just, I know that a lot of it is being made of Atletico Ottawa underachieving. This is a team that a lot of people that watch this league closely thought that Pacific was going to run away with this league. And look where they are, fourth, and backing their way into the playoffs. It's just been a miserable run of form. So, yeah. Shoot, fire. Go ahead.
To answer your question, Ollie,
who do you think they're going to play? I don't know. I have no clue.
I hate this because they're not going to do this, but this is what I would do. And no one should trust me because I don't have a single coaching badge. I've wanted to see them in a proper 4-4-2 for a while. The 4-3-3 is not working. I want to see Ungaro and Daniels a two-headed monster, and then actually have some more width in midfield and try and go a bit more direct because they're capable of it. I don't think they're going to do that because James Merriman likes to say he is the 4-3-3, and to his credit, he sticks to it. So if that's the case, then I think you need Hurd on the wing. You need, I don't trust Ungaro. Daniels and Salouf, I think, in a must-win. Am I far off for you, Ollie?
I think they should play Hurd on the left. I think he's a lot better on the left. He hasn't played it a lot this season because Salouf has been there and Mane has been there. And I played Daniels and Reed with him, but I'm not. The Salouf one is the interesting one, right? Because he's a great player individually, but they have been markedly better when he has not started this season. They're 2-6-6 when he starts, 9-1-4 when he doesn't. I don't think that tells the full story because you look at the games Salouf has played in, like the last 5, Cavalry, Ottawa, Halifax, Ottawa, Fort. I think he plays in quite a lot of the hard games, and that skews the with and without a little bit. But those stats at the same time, it's 0.9 points per game versus 2 points per game. They're pretty stark at this point. So, and he has been great off the bench. So I've got Hurd, Daniels, and Reed would be my preferred front three right now, but I don't have the answers here, and the worrying thing is I'm not sure they do.
What's crazy to me is the change that happened out of that first game. You're in essentially what is a must-win game. You need to come away with something in order to at least threaten to finish second place. They play this weird formation, but Hoos gets to start. Ungaro gets to start. He wasn't even originally in the 18 to start last game before all of a sudden he was, and Reed was out of the game. Downright bizarre. Then Ungaro goes and starts that game. And your captain is on the bench in Josh Hurd, who was took off at halftime the week prior. Toussaint didn't play that game. Reed, who looked like was supposed to start, didn't start the game on the weekend. Kikuta Mane, the most experienced, the guy that's played at the highest level, he doesn't play. It's so much chopping and changing. I just simply don't know. I think I'd go with the team that Ollie said. I bring Toussaint back in the midfield. I know how good that Yates has played, but go with what has worked for your team. The players that have chemistry and connections and partnerships with one another. I bring Mukabilwa back into the team.
Yep.
For Vliet. There's a lot of changes that I make, but I have no idea how that's going to look. I'd probably play a team that's very similar to the team that beat York United 4-1, where Daniels led the line because the way that they pressed the out of York and just made them look second rate. I mean, that's probably the team because there's a reference point there. Go out and play this way and we can be successful. So that's probably what I do if I'm James Merriman, but not an easy one whatsoever.
Okay, so the flip side of that argument then, Gareth, and we've already touched on the dynamics here, but York United and the fact that they might be playing with house money a little bit. The best season in club history. Congratulations to Martin Ash and company for that. Do you think they're a legitimate threat to run the gauntlet here and do some damage to clubs that might be surprised by them? Or do you think now that it's playoff time, things might be a little bit tighter and we've seen some of the inherent flaws as every club in this league has? Do you think it might catch up with them?
I don't think they'll run the gauntlet here, but do I think they can beat Pacific? Yes. I mean, the two sides are 6-6-6, the devil, all time against one another. So, I mean, history bears it that these two teams are very evenly played. It's another team where Martin Nash has a decision to make. Clearly, he's going to be playing Babuli in behind De Rosario, who's hitting some form at the right time. Austin Ricci suspended. With all due respect to Ricci, I don't think it's a huge loss because the one area that there's some real depth in this York United side is the wing areas. If Kevin DeSantos is fit enough, he's starting. There's no need to lean on some of these younger players, even though Martin Perreault, I thought, played really well in that final game. But you can kind of take out some of those under 21 players and play to your strength. I mean, Daniel Laparé, we need an injury update on him. I think he limped off the field, but Sumaro, you have some strength there. Paris G, one of the most underrated players in the Canadian Premier League on the season. Johnny Grant looks fit, the fittest he's been all season. Like, this team has some real players in it, and they have some depth as well. So I think they can do some damage. Halifax, another team that they've had success at in recent years. It's just a tough one. Wednesday, quick turnaround to Saturday, flying from Victoria to Halifax. It just, that gauntlet might be a little bit too much, but I'm calling this game a little bit of a 50-50 here on Wednesday night. I'm not sure how it's going to play out. Pacific will be the favorites in this game, but can York United go on and win it? Absolutely, and it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest.
Yeah, I think the travel to Halifax is the most difficult part of really seeing them kind of going deep in the playoffs. But they all fancy the matchups, like a vulnerable Pacific team that as we just spoke about, and then they always seem to go and have success in Halifax, even when they're totally out of form at times. So they're two matches that they'll like. I thought the big step forward for them in the Vancouver game that sealed their playoff place was that, at least until Austin Ricci did what he did late in the game, there was more discipline than we've seen in recent weeks from York United. They conceded a goal, which was way offside and shouldn't have stood, but didn't kind of melt down and overreact to that. I thought Mo Babuli got kicked around the pitch, basically, and he had a few words for the ref and for his opponents, but mostly kept a lid on it and just stayed focused on the game, concentrated on the game. And then you have Asaze de Rosario, back in form, right? Which can be a massive difference maker when you start getting to knockout football, is just to have a striker who's taking chances that aren't really chances, like that one, and finding the back of the net. So there's things to feel good about for York for sure. I think they're kind of playing with house money to a certain extent as well, in the position they're in. I just worry a little bit, firstly, about the travel, like I said, but also maybe the defensive issues that this team has had over the course of the season. Noah Abatne, I think, has vastly improved in recent weeks, but he went off injured as well as Gagnon Laparé against Vancouver. So are they going to be able to be tight enough defensively in the playoffs? I'm not so sure. If they can get to Saturday, fantastic, and then let's see what they can do in Halifax.
I mean, the schedule worked out for York United as well because they played in Vancouver. They got to stay there. And if players are joining them, I'm sure that's the case to replace some of the players who are either suspended or out through injury. But, Pacific played Sunday and then travel. York United played Saturday, Pacific played Saturday, then had to travel home. York United played Friday night and have been sitting waiting that extra day as well. I mean, when it gets down to it, York United, it's a team with an identity. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Pacific, what is their identity? And going through a playoff match, I'd rather go with the team that knows a little bit about who they are rather than the team that doesn't.
I will give this to Pacific. They've shown that on big occasions they can get the job done. I think of how they absolutely demolished Waterhouse last season, and they still have that sour taste in their mouth about how the Whitecaps match went in the Canadian Championship. And because this is their last home game of the season, win, lose, or draw, I think there's going to be that little extra fire in them. But York United, I don't know that they're scarier, York United, than I think anyone thought they might have been with how this season ended. And it's interesting you bring up the rest wheels, because in a world where they win 2 games in a row, 4 jump sets Cavalry, they're going Pacific, Halifax, Cavalry for the 2 game, only to come home finally. Like, if this is truly the most difficult set of circumstances for York United, but at least they have a shot. Ottawa would certainly be happy to be in that position now.
I just want to say really quickly, I know that Pacific fans, like, you might be watching this saying, well, why are they so negative on our team? We're not. I think the Pacific, like, if they can somehow bring this together, they're as dangerous as anyone because of the players that they have in their team. They just need to show it that they can play as a team. That's what it comes down to.
And that's the other thing too about playoff football that I think both of you will agree. They get that one, and let's say it's a convincing result against York United, nobody is going to want to play them in form. Absolutely nobody is going to want to play them in form. So it's one of the many reasons why we are excited for this upcoming playoffs that begin on Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific time at Pacific.